name is Crancer, President and CEO of the Crancer Group. I want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So, today I think we have it's not a sexy topic, I guess. So you talk about it, but I think it's something that's actually quite important to all of us in the community, and it's really we're going to be talking about this transition from EA to CSP. Let me introduce my cohort today, Andres Oseguera, the great AOC. Andres, can you please introduce yourself?
No problem, Joe. I'm happy to be here. I see some familiar faces in the crowd, so thanks everybody for coming here today. Very excited to share some more information about one of the biggest announcements really over the last couple of years that Microsoft is coming out with here in terms of the transition. What I think is probably a good idea, just to get started, before we get into any of the slides, Sherman, if you're open to it, is maybe giving a little bit of a background. You came from Microsoft 5 years there. So, and we were actually chatting about this before the call. You were there at Microsoft when the CSP initiative started. So I'm wondering if you could give a little bit of background here for anybody who's watching in terms of, what's the history of EA and CSP?
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a good segue, a good start here. So, when CSP came out, gosh, was it 2015? I think that's 15 or 16. Remember, we were all up in arms. Everyone was, this is terrible, right? We have to actually start doing billing, and we're going to have to become a CSP provider. What does that mean? And I think back then, there was always this thing called the enterprise agreement or open licensing. Remember open licensing, but there's the enterprise agreement. And the enterprise agreement was really a way that Microsoft could, package and bundle all the on-prem SKUs, right? And then they started adding some of the cloud SKUs to it, right? And this was actually reserved for any company that was on the what's called major account list. Now, there's three different categories, but the major account list starts when a company has 500 seats or more, or there's a certain threshold in Azure consumption, right? And it's a major account, and then they're assigned an actual Microsoft rep. So typically, the majority of all enterprise agreements are with companies that are 500 seats and above, and we'll go into the different classifications in a minute. But there's been a lot of history of channel conflict, with Microsoft, right, and partners. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to partners where they're like, yeah, man, I don't even want to tell Microsoft what's going on, because every time I do, they just swoop in and they just offer a super huge discount and I can never compete. Or they swoop in and they take the licensing. They swoop in and, they put us in a position where we can never discount as far as they want to, because they'll put people on a 3-year agreement, right?
No, that's great. And you kind of went into the second piece, Sherman, because we were kind of thinking, let's talk a little bit about the primary differences. But based on what you mentioned there, it was really more exclusive for some of these larger clients, right? And it really seems this actually goes very hand in hand with, if you guys remember, over the last last year and a half, the PDM group shrunk considerably. And then a ton of the Microsoft account teams that were targeting these smaller accounts also got phased out as well. So it really seems to me like Microsoft says, on these larger enterprise accounts, we're going to we're going to be locked in, and we're going to be working with them directly. But partner base, it's time. You guys are going to take everybody in that SMB space. It's all yours. So I do think it is a massive opportunity. And it's all about aligning yourself appropriately. And we'll talk about that in a second.
Let's kind of get into that, Andres, the pricing. How does that compare with EA and CSP, not taking into account what Michael was just saying?
Yeah, well, we were talking about it, or you were mentioning it earlier, right? Typically with an EA, there was huge discounts, or they could provide potentially some SKUs that you couldn't provide in CSP for those customers. However, with the new commerce experience, the idea from Microsoft is that there's parity now, meaning you've got EA customers, you got CSP customers. If they're going whichever route they're going, they're getting similar pricing, if not the exact same, for the vast majority of the workloads that they're purchasing. Now, to your point, Sherman, there might be some additional ways for the Microsoft account teams to throw in a support contract here or throw in some of these additional items, and maybe they're able to get a discount for the customer in that way. But if we're going like for like, 1,000 M365 E5 licenses, they're supposed to be the same through an EA or through CSP. Same thing for Azure. So it's supposed to be priced the same, no issues. And I think the biggest difference between the two paths that is very clear is the terms of payment, right? So on an EA, right, you're typically paying either, for a year or a few years up front, whereas in the new commerce experience, you can actually pay on a monthly basis. Now there is a premium to that, but you have the opportunity to do that on, these year or 3-year type of commitment. So I think for the customer, you get a little bit more flexibility if you want to be paying on a monthly basis. But really ultimately, and we'll get into it a little bit later, it comes down to the support you can get from the partner. I really think that has to be the main selling point when you're having these conversations with these EA customers, because they may have already been getting that direct support from Microsoft, and so they're used to that. They're comfortable with that, and so you need to get them across the line and understand that you guys have all those same level of skills, maybe even a faster support team for them. So,
what is the main thing that a partner is going to have to remember when they want to do this, and how do they protect themselves?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is it depends on what the actual workload is, right? So if we're talking Microsoft 365, Dynamics, or security, that's what I can go through right now. And it's a relatively simple process that Sherman's got slides on. When you're talking about Azure, it's a little bit more complex. And that's because there's not necessarily like a one-click button migration that allows you to go from an EA environment to a CSP environment for the majority of partners out there. And I know I've gotten a lot of feedback from my partner base that they said, I don't understand the strategy because it's essentially a brand new migration, and it's causing, an opportunity for the customer to really just reevaluate what they want to do. That said, it is relatively simple from the modern work side, and that's what I wanted to go through, because I think in my mind, this really shows you that this is happening and there's a momentum to get this initiative off the ground. And so what you'll notice here, Sherman's got the basic user flow on the screen. Essentially, how this works is the customer has to accept an agreement with you inside of Partner Center for as a reseller relationship, right? They associate with you, you send them a link, they accept. And when that actually happens, you're now able to see their EA inside of your Partner Center. So you'll be able to click on them as your customer, and it'll show you this is when their current EA is going to expire. Let's say, for example, at the end of June, or in this case, it's January 23rd of 25, right? And you'll notice it actually tells you what's included, right? In this case, they had 125 licenses for E3, and it also tells you, can you renew this to CSP, right? Not everything is going to be able to get renewed into a CSP agreement. It's just the reality. However, I think one of the most important takeaways that I want to make very clear, and you'll notice if you go through these slides later on, it specifically spells it out, because I know this was a big question for a lot of partners. Yes, if you have a current agreement that has teams inside of the enterprise suite, if you renew it inside of your renewal window, you can actually keep teams as a part of that license agreement. So what does that mean for these EA customers? It's a really big deal, because if they can't renew the EA and they're going to have to go through CSP, if they don't do it within their required timeline, it's going to be a lot more expensive for them moving forward, because they're going to have to start paying for teams separately. Now, there's also another caveat I want to throw in there that's, I think, very important for everybody to understand. And it's nice to see a lot of us who answered the poll already have something in place for how we're targeting these customers. I think that's absolutely critical, because it's all about timing here, you guys. When the customer accepts the relationship with you as the partner inside of Partner Center, and you go through the process of selecting Renew to CSP, you're essentially locking in that customer to work with you directly.
Okay, but
I had a question for you, Sherm. If you were a partner today, right, and you had, let's say 5 of these EA customers you've done some services with in the past, and you said, you know what, I'm trying to convert a few of these, I want to be their CSP. How are you positioning yourself to make yourself as attractive as possible? Do you have any thoughts or any opinions you want to share with everybody here? Because I think that's also a very important piece of this.
Well, I think it's, in my opinion, it's going back to the basics of who you are, right? And what do, right? I mean, you're already servicing the client, and I think I would harp up on, support. I would harp up on support and how hard is it to get support on your licensing, and especially if they didn't have a premier support contract in their EA, right? Then it's just like impossible to get any support on things, and I think that's really where I would hang my hat on is first on support. Second, I would really talk to them about the advantages and disadvantages of having, maybe 80% on a 1-year agreement and 20% on a month to kind of help them manage through seasonality, right, with their licenses. Providing them options, providing them, different ways of looking at different types of SKUs. And then I would say, hey, you've been constantly locked into these 3-year agreements. We haven't seen prices go up. We've seen prices go down, and we might be able to help out with even a little bit of margin, maybe 2-3% of your 15 or 18 that you're getting, right? So I think that there's really two things: maneuverability, but also support, right? Maneuverability inside of the contract, but also support, from what you do on a daily basis. Give you a call right away, as opposed to first calls to India, second calls, then transfer to the Philippines, then the Philippines is transferred to South America, and then the fourth call finally gets you to a U.S.-based services representative, right? Everyone hates that. We all have to do that. Even my guys have to do that sometimes when we're trying to track down somebody, right, or track down something. It just makes you want to just scream, with that. So I think that's interesting. Andres, we've had a conversation with a couple enterprise reps. Remember, we had that with our partner on the East Coast. I don't want to say names, but remember we talked to him. We were very specific about the pricing, and you want to kind of just talk a little bit about that conversation. What came from the horse's mouth? The salesperson that was selling.
Again, right? Everybody's got their own motivations, but trustworthy source, I'd say, right? The end result to that conversation for us, which was big for me, because throughout the years I've been working here, my biggest concern always for partners was that, especially in these types of channel conflicts that you were talking about, Sherman, it always felt like it was a partner was bringing a knife to a gunfight, so to speak, right? Like it felt like they were overmatched. They just didn't have the same capabilities to try and close that deal. And so when he told me, he said, look, I'll be honest with you. I don't care if I sell this through an EA or through CSP. I make the same amount of money either way. That was a very eye-opening line for me to hear, because to me what that means is that, okay, there is an incentive to work with you if you can show value as a partner to not only the customer but also the Microsoft account team. And so I think this goes hand in hand with a lot of things that we talk about, Sherman, just in general, maximizing your Microsoft relationship. When you start getting involved in these deal registrations and co-selling and doing all these different things, you've got to have this. You've got to have something that you're bringing to market that's different from everybody else. I know everybody says that, but it's just the reality, right? There's so many partners out there. Why do these account teams want to work with you in the first place? Because now they're incentivized to a certain extent. If they think you can provide better service than they can, and they make the same amount of money driving that same sale with the customer, why wouldn't they do that?
Actually, we have a question here.
Bruce has a question. Why don't we let him ask you?
Bruce, go ahead.
Herman and Andreas, I just wanted to chime in with a conversation I had with some SMCC sellers, and to clarify on, does it matter to them if it goes through CSP or not? If it goes month-to-month CSP, then it's an impact on them. If it goes annual prepaid CSP, then they get their commission. So otherwise, it bleeds the commission every month. So their preference was, if you guys are willing to work with your clients to get annual annual payment on the licenses, then we're happy for it to go through CSP. So just a little bit of a nuance on that directly from some of the sellers.
Dude, thank you. That is great. And that's why we have this forum here. It's like for us to all kind of like get some of these things right. We can be better, right? So thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. You bet.
I really appreciate
Cheers.
it. All right. And so that's one-to-one. So this is the secret. This is what we stumbled upon this about 5 months ago, and it's in play. So at the end of one of my calls, I was actually with a partner, with an account rep at Microsoft, and I said to them, I said, hey, thanks for sharing your list of accounts. I said, my partner here is a leader in AI and probably one of the first partners that did jump starts, inside of for Microsoft, right? They've got all the SPDs, they got the advanced specializations, bing, 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 bing. They're qualified. What we would like to do for you, Mr. or Mrs. Microsoft seller, is we'd like to put on a webinar or a panel discussion for all of your clients about getting ready for AI. And then the call to action would be doing a AI jumpstart. Now, what was interesting is I threw it out there just kind of to see what happens. I like to do that. I like to put fishing rod, put poles in the water and see what happens. And it was like the Moby Dick whale came out of the pond and bit onto this thing. Like, yes, we want to do it. So get this. So we went from getting one meeting or talking about one account to all of a sudden the Microsoft rep said, yeah, here you go. And then I said, well, we'll take care of all the details. We'll do the registration page. We'll put this whole thing on for you. We'll send you the questions that we're going to be asking. We're making a Q&A, right, type of deal. There's no risk. Don't worry about it. They bid on it. And then we were able to actually do a webinar in front of, it was like a webinar, but it was a webinar session in front of 35 of their clients at once. Now think about that, okay? Now I'm letting this cat out of the bag because the reality is you may or may not need our help with that. We can help you, we can talk to you about that, but nobody else is doing that. Every person that's out there talking to these account reps is asking, can I get your list of accounts? Yes, great. Which ones do we work on? Yes, great. Blah, 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 blah. Now, I've always been of the school of thought of never be like anybody else and try to push the limits, push the boundaries. And it'd be surprised. And this is the other thing that I learned. If you never ask, you'll never know the answer. So we just asked. We're like, hey, can we do a webinar for all of your clients at once? Can you send the invites? Can you do that? Right? And the Microsoft rep said, yeah, I'll do it. This is crazy. It's the craziest thing ever. So anyways, that's secret sauce to really expand. If you're trying to work that channel, that's how you really work that channel. So anyways, Andres, thanks so much for hearing. Everybody, thanks a lot for spending the hour with us. We'll be back at the end of next month. I want to say thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Tell your friends. We'd like to get more people to this. We'd really, and let them know that we're not here to sell anything. We're here to actually solve problems and solve issues, and discuss and work with each other. But thank you once again. Thank you, Andres. Thank you again. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you next month. All right. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.